We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I can say it is to wage war by sea, land, and air with all of our might and with all the strength that God can give us. It is to wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalog of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word. It is victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be, for without victory there is no survival. Let that be realized. No survival for the British Empire. No survival for all that the British Empire has stood for. No survival for the urge and impulse of the ages that mankind will move forward toward its goal. But I take up my task with buoyancy and with hope. I feel sure that our cause will not be suffered to fail among men. At this time I feel entitled to claim with the aid of all and say, come then, and let us go forward with our united strength. Winston Churchill, May 13th, 1940. Section 1. Debate is more than just arguments. What makes a speech good? If a speech is good, I mean really, really good, you don't just hear it, you don't just think it, you feel it. Arguments become more than just cold logic. They become inescapable facts. You become drawn toward the speaker. You empathize with her. Your hair raises. It's a sublime moment. We've all felt this feeling, whether we acknowledge it or not. Hearing a great speech, a great 2AR, a beautiful passage in a book we're reading, a great monologue in a movie, there is that moment of persuasion that can pervert rationality to its own ends. The objective of this lecture is to equip and train you to give that sublime speech. Your goal in debate is to persuade a critic that your arguments are superior to your opponents. You certainly do this by making smart, logical arguments. You do this by reading the best evidence. You do this by doing math problems on the board, perhaps. But you also must use the power of persuasion. The vast majority of what we do at camp doesn't discuss this, doesn't think about it, doesn't talk about it. We talk about debate itself and arguments and the content, but the form is also highly relevant. The reason I am giving this lecture is that there's more to persuasion than having the best cards or the best arguments. Sure, if you're debating a team who you're simply better than, Clown Shoes High School State, you're probably going to win because you outclassed them, and this lecture might not be that useful in those debates. But at the margins, in the break rounds, in the big debates, in the elimination rounds, you simply can't outclass your opposition anymore. For every argument, they have a counter-argument. For every point, they have a counterpoint. For every historical example, they have a counter-historical example. For every card you have, they have a counter-card. You can't get by them on logic alone. In these debates, the margins are minuscule. The number of 2-1 or 3-2 or 4-3 or even 5-4 decisions in college debate is astounding. The margins are minuscule. The difference between the top speaker at a tournament and the 10th or 15th speaker at a tournament is normally 1 to 1.5 speaker points. That's 0.1 per debate in most instances. Minuscule. So how do judges resolve these debates? How do judges differentiate between a 29 and a 29.1? Put more bluntly, what is the difference between good and great? It is persuasion, plain and simple. At the end of a round, some arguments, for whatever reason, stand out more than others. For whatever reason, one team's logic is more compelling. And a lot of the time, whether they admit it or not, the judge simply votes for the team who seems like they're winning, or the team who they want to win. Now, your reputation or standing in the community might be an important part of this equation. Another important part, the practical part, the part we're discussing today, is the techniques of rhetoric and the techniques of persuasion. The Greek sophist Gorgias wrote in 414 BC that the power of speech has the same effect on the condition of the soul as the application of drugs to the state of bodies. For just as different drugs dispel different fluids from the body, and some bring an end to disease, but others end life, so also some speeches cause pain, some pleasure, some fear, some instill courage, some drug and bewitch the soul. Sounds like a handy thing to be able to do with words. Who were the sophists? The sophists were people in ancient Greece who basically sold their skills as rhetoricians and persuaders. They educated people, and they prided themselves on being able to convince you through clever rhetoric that the weaker argument, based on logic, is actually the stronger argument. They tried to make the weaker argument seem stronger. Now, in your day-to-day life, this might not be something you should do. You should always, have some sort of grounding in ethics and carry that with you throughout debate. But this is a useful and necessary skill in order to win debates and in order to be effective. You debate both sides of issues. You aren't always right. Even if you're right about some things, you're not always right about everything. You aren't always on the side of absolute truth. You don't always have the best evidence on an issue. So sure, you need evidence and you need sound arguments, but you also need to say them and make them in the most effective way possible. Put another way, persuasion is not just what you say, it is how you say it. Persuasion isn't what you say, it's how you say it. Your argument gets stronger or weaker based off how you say it. If you don't invest time and thought in thinking about your public speaking techniques, your writing, your persuasion skills, you're doing a disservice to the rest of your work. Failure to work on persuasion is not a passive decision to not make your argument stronger, it is an active decision to weaken your arguments. Much like a decision not to vote isn't a decision not to do anything, it is an active decision to maintain a status quo. Failure to work on persuasion means you will lose to those who are more persuasive than you, even if you're objectively right about something. A couple examples of this. Socrates, you may have heard of him. Perhaps the father of modern logic and philosophy. He wasn't really that into persuasion. He wore tarnished robes, he was apparently a really ugly dude, he just kind of wandered around and simply believed in making good arguments. He eventually got put on trial by some sophists for worshiping the wrong gods. Now, the sophists wanted him out of there because he was bad for business, because he said everything that they said was crap. So he had a trial for his life in front of the entire Athenian assembly, and he put a logical beatdown on these guys. He made every great argument you could possibly make. Some of you may have read Socrates' Apology. It's pretty comprehensive, and his arguments are way better than their arguments. But what happened to Socrates? He got sentenced to death and had to drink poison and die. It's because even though his arguments were logical, they controlled the crowd. Not even the greatest logician of all time could beat someone clever and persuasive. And if Socrates can't win without persuasion, you certainly can. Another example, if I said, I have a story for you. There was once a fisherman, and he hadn't caught anything in a while. And then he caught a fish, and it was a big fish, and it took a while, and then when he was coming back, some sharks ate the fish, but he was still proud. You would say, that story sucks. That story is The Old Man and the Sea, and it's one of the greatest novels or books of the 20th century. Now, what I've done is I've told you the entire story, I've given you all the content, I've given you all the facts, but I've removed the persuasive value. I've removed the artistry, the thing that makes that story interesting. Not a lot happens there, but yet it's still compelling because of the way it's written, because of the way it's conveyed. What about that Churchill speech I opened with? The content of that speech is basically like a pump-up speech for the British people. The context of that speech, however, was that they were getting crushed. They were getting crushed by the Nazis at that point in time. If Churchill had just spoken of the realities, had just made the arguments, he would have just been like, my friends, there is probably no way we can win. They have better generals, they have better troops, they have better equipment, they have more people than us. We're losing every battle we fight in. And London is kind of on fire, but keep trying, guys, keep trying. If that was the speech as opposed to something aspirational and motivational, we would all be wearing lederhosen and eating kielbasa right now. But fortunately, Churchill was kind enough to add a little persuasive value for the speech. Another example, maybe closer to home. Many people's reasons for decision in the demonstration debate yesterday had very little to do with the arguments that were actually made in the debate. A lot of people's RFDs, they were kind of unable to explain the logic of why they voted a particular way. It was more just like, oh, I felt like they won. Why did you feel like they won? Why did that emotional effect take place? That emotional effect took place because something about something they said was probably persuasive. You've all been there. You've all had a debate, most likely, where you think you crushed the opposition. They dropped all of these arguments. You had every part of the flow going in your favor. You had better evidence on every issue, but then you lost. And you just lose. And people get up and they're like, I'm confused, I lost. And you know what their response generally is? The response is, that judge was bad. That judge was bad and I got screwed. This was not fair. Nope, incorrect. It's part of the game. As much as people want to believe the debate is a neutral space of intellectual contestation, it isn't. Persuasion matters. You can win on the line by line, win objectively, and still lose the judge. That's not an opinion, that's a reality. It's the reality that, I was trying to hammer home in my previous lecture when I kept on saying judges are not computers. That's a reality I hope, as opposed to opposing and saying, I got screwed by that judge, I hope it's a reality that you understand and adapt to, because that's what the best debaters do. The best debaters realize that different judges can be persuaded in different ways, and that they should try to work to learn those techniques of persuasion, as opposed to just saying, it's the judge's fault and not mine. Communication activity. Learn to communicate. You spent the rest of camp, pretty much, figuring out part A. How to make the best arguments possible and cut the best possible cards, but your education in public speaking itself, how to make your arguments matter, is sorely lacking. Good public speaking, if applied, will win you more debates than any disadvantage or counterplan. It is the one skill you can take away from camp that will make every argument that you have on your computer from A-Spec to Zizek better. Learn it well, give it the care it warrants, and I promise you will get better speaker points, win many more debates as a result. Section 2. What does a good speech do? What does a good speech do? Aristotle was the first person in the Western canon of philosophy to really talk a lot about rhetoric and how to do it. He wrote a bunch of books on it. We'll use his definition of what a good speech is from the third book of rhetoric because I think it's pretty interesting and I think it still lines up today. And don't worry about writing all this down right now because we're going to come back to each of these. He said a good speech does 4 things. First, it makes the audience well disposed to yourself and ill disposed toward your opponent. Second, it magnifies or minimizes the leading facts. Third, it excites the required kind of emotion in your hearers. And fourth, it refreshes their memories by means of recapitulation. Let's go through all of those. First, a good speech makes the audience well disposed toward yourself and ill disposed toward your opponent. What does it mean for a judge to be well disposed toward you? It just means making a judge like you or like your speech, basically. There are a lot of ways to do this. Some of this is reputational in the community. If you have a reputation as a hardworking person, that affects your ability to be persuasive. Ancient Greeks who wrote about persuasion said that there were ethos, pathos, and logos. Logos, the logic you speak with. Pathos, the emotion you speak with. Ethos, where you come from, basically. Your standing and your credibility. They said the most important by far was ethos. You could be a great rhetorician, a very logical rhetorician, but if you weren't credible, you wouldn't be as persuasive to people. And that's a big part of making your audience well disposed toward you. Which means, that's probably a reason why you should try to get a reputation as someone who's a hard worker. Try to be nice to your opponents and other debaters. Be someone who judges want to judge. Someone who judges want to help, who they want to listen to. Other ways to do this, making the debate clean, clear, easy to flow. I talked about this a lot in the judging lecture. That makes judges happy. Happy judge, more likely to vote for you. It's very simple. There are some... no, we won't do it. We don't have time for that. All right. Also, a good amount of the work done to getting the audience well disposed for you is just being nice. If you're a jackass, Gorgias and Aristotle, won't vote for you. Socrates might, but you're probably still not going to win because that's a 2-1 decision of old Greek people. And that's not a debate that you're winning. So, be nice, make the audience well disposed toward you, the audience being the judge, and sometimes the audience being the crowd. Debaters in big elimination rounds who can effectively engage the crowd and get the crowd on their side tend to win more debates. Because it is intimidating for a judge, and it is recognizable for a judge, that someone is really on fire right now. They're making jokes, they're making great arguments, they're getting reactions and gasps from the crowd, and that very subtly might affect the way judges judge debates. In a much more brutal sport judged by judges, other than debate, which is boxing, this is highly relevant. There are things called hometown decisions in boxing, where judges who are trained to know exactly when a punch was landed, exactly how to score rounds, consistently and over time, the fighter who is in their own hometown, who has the crowd in their favor, tends to win more on the judges' scorecards. It's because the crowd cheers every time they land a punch, even if it wasn't a very good punch, and they don't react to the other side's arguments. That's just the audience being well disposed toward those people, and that's a form of persuasion. Second thing that a good speech does, it magnifies or minimizes the leading facts. Magnifies or minimizes the leading facts. We have a name for this in debate today. Can anyone think of what it is? We just had an hour-long lecture about it. It is impact calculus. You magnify or minimize the leading facts. I find it sort of entertaining that Aristotle, more than 2,000 years ago, talked about how important impact calc is. Stephen just talked about it for an hour. I won't belabor it. But there are other ways to magnify or minimize leading facts that are techniques of rhetoric. We'll talk about this a little more later. Third thing a good speech does, it excites the required kind of emotion in your listener. It excites the required kind of emotion in your listener. Two parts of this that are important. One, emotion. It matters for decision making. Jonah Lehrer, who is a columnist and author, has done a bunch of work, and now that there are better functional MRI studies, we can verify a lot of this work about how people decide things. And the conclusion that a lot of researchers have come to about how people decide things is that they justify the decisions after they make them. The logic part comes after something else. It comes after an emotional content. Whether you like vanilla or chocolate ice cream is an emotional decision that you might justify afterwards. Vanilla is delicious and vanilla-y. Chocolate is chocolatey smooth. But those aren't the actual reasons why you've made the decision. This is true for deciding about debate arguments too in most instances. Something is just more persuasive to you. You might not be able to explain why. It might be something stylistic, something aesthetic, something you can't entirely demonstrate. It's like love at first sight. It can't be explained, but you love that argument. You want to take it home. You want to be with it forever and vote for it as many times as you can. Second part of this that is very important. Not only exciting emotion, but exciting the required kind of emotion. The required kind of emotion. That means your tone needs to vary based off the sorts of arguments you are making. An impassioned plea in favor of patriarchy being a really bad thing, it's probably a good use of the required use of emotion. An impassioned plea that we need to consult the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, yea, verily, we must consult them, for they are our friends, and they require our support, and we are not offering that to them, and that is a tragedy. No, that's not terribly effective. If you're using, a grandiose speech to say that there's no internal link to the politics dissad, that might not be the required kind of emotion for the argument you're making. If you're making an argument that is, pedantic, you're an expert on an issue, and you're telling someone that they're wrong about something, then the required kind of emotion is different than you're making an argument where you're just making an impassioned plea about your human rights advantage. The required kind of emotion is important, as well as just emotion. Fourth thing that a good speech does, it refreshes their memories by means of recapitulation. Refreshes their memories by means of a recapitulation. This is another thing that we have in debate today. Can anyone think of what this is? An overview? I didn't hear anyone say that, but I'll pretend I did. Yes, overview, thank you. Aristotle knew about the overview. The overview is a recapitulation and a crystallization of the things that have happened in a debate. Any good final rebuttal, if you notice both Jason's 2NR and Julia's 2AR, began with basically an impact calculus overview. It was like, these are the facts that are important in this debate, and I will refresh your memories about them by means of recapitulation. Now, competitive debate is a little bit different than, regular public speaking, because you don't really have as much time to repeat yourself again and again, so you don't want to just be like, in the 1NC we read 5 off case positions, in the block it was but 4, in the 2NR we went for 1 and it was grand, and now I am extending it here. You don't need to do that sort of refreshing their memories, but refreshing the memories about the important arguments, the reasons why your disadvantage outweigh, the reasons why your critique alternative solves, the reasons why your T interpretation is best. Refreshing their memories is important. Section 3, persuasion basics. Persuasion basics. 10 things. First, 10, really? That's a scary number. It was pared down from way more. First, clarity before everything. Clarity before everything. Nothing, absolutely nothing is worse for your ability to persuade than a lack of clarity. If a judge can't understand what you're saying, a few things will happen. A, they will miss arguments. If there is no time to flow, and no argument gets written down because you're not clear and they don't know what to flow, it might as well not exist. Flowing doesn't just mean they have a record of it. Flowing is a form of information processing. Julia was talking to our lab about studies about writing things as you read them, like the process of note-taking. That's useful not only because you have notes afterwards, but because the act of writing things down as you listen to them increases your comprehension and fluency with those facts. So if a judge can't flow an argument, not only does she not have it on the flow, she doesn't know what it is and she doesn't understand it. They will miss arguments. B, they miss understanding. Thoughts take time to process. The judge didn't write your blocks. The judge doesn't know your arguments as well as you do. An argument not understood is an argument that might as well not even exist. More than that, you need the judge to understand the argument while you're making it, because the rest of your arguments might build off it. If a judge only understands your 2NC argument after the debate or after reading the card because they couldn't understand the words you were saying in the card, then all the explanation you've done about that evidence throughout the debate has not been as persuasive to the judge. It hasn't made as much sense. They haven't comprehended as much. All of their answers to that evidence have been more persuasive because the judge didn't already have a conception of what that argument meant. Missing understanding is incredibly terrible. And C subpoint, the judge will check out. The judge will check out. If you make no attempt to engage a judge persuasively and emotionally, they will get frustrated and bored and stop trying. If a judge can understand you, it's like watching a movie in a foreign language with no subtitles. It could be a great movie. Be like, wow, this is awesome, but it could be the greatest movie of all time, but you'll eventually stop paying attention because you don't know what's going on. It's hard to get into that. This is just a natural fact of the human attention span. And so if you don't engage the judge will stop caring. It is their job to care, and they will try, but you got to meet them halfway. And D subpoint, you will lose any possible benefits of persuasion if you are unclear. Speed, in a lot of ways, or lack of clarity, is antithetical to persuasion. In regular life, you never see anyone going fast to try to convince someone to do something. You know, you go to a car dealership, now, what'll it take to get you to walk out of here in a new car today? They're not talking fast, they're trying to sell you something and they're doing it slowly. You see people on television hawking products. Billy Mays here! Well, Billy Mays has been dead for a while. You might not have seen those commercials. But he speaks a little more slowly. He's not trying to blaze through things. They blaze through things that they don't want you to know. OxyClean might kill you and your dog. They say that very quickly. They don't say that slowly because they're not trying to persuade you of that. Whereas you think of the counterpoint, an auctioneer is someone who talks really fast. Is an auctioneer someone who is trying to have people make well thought out, rational decisions in favor of something? No. An auctioneer wants to incite chaos so people do impulsive stuff. It's like, oh, my heart rate is raising, he's talking really fast, yeah, impulse decision. Right? That's not what you want as a debater. You want a judge to not be impulsive. You want a judge to pay attention and give your arguments some merit. Some anecdotes. A lot of the very best debaters that I know, and the very most effective debaters I know, realize that clarity is more important than everything. I think if you talk to any top-level debater who has ever won speaker awards, I know this is true of Stephen, I know this is true of my friend Kuntal, both of them have won NDT Top Speaker Awards, so maybe we should listen to them. They can both go way faster than they actually went in debates. Way faster. This was probably true of me as well, although I never won that many speaker awards. You can go way faster outside of debates than you can in them because those two more cards you read aren't as important as a judge understanding everything you say. If the sacrifice is, I can kick up the speed to 11 as opposed to 10, it can really bring the noise. and the judge understands less of every word you say, are those 2 cards really worth it? Probably not. Oh, also, all of your judges agree that clarity is important. Let's go through some people in the debate community and some things I pulled from their judge philosophies. Jared Ashington, director at Wake Forest Debate. People need to slow down. My ballot goes to the team that does the best debating, not the most debating. Ed Lee, director of debate at Emory. It really is a communication activity. Judges are human and not computerized info processors. People need to slow down and let me understand, otherwise I'm a bad judge. Jenny Height, director of debate at Westminster. My #1 piece of advice is to slow down. Jason Peterson, coach at California and previously a very successful high school coach at St. Mark's and other places. I think debate has become faster than it needs to be. I might just be having a negative reaction to unclear debaters who don't explain their arguments, but I think a trend is developing where desire to talk fast as possible is replacing the need for stylistic explanation. The #1 criteria of speaker points is clarity. Michael Greenstein, director at Glenbrook North Debate, 2-time TOC finalist the last 2 years. Stylistically, clarity is the utmost importance. Callum Matheson, coach of debate at Harvard and one of the highest preferred judges in the country. You must communicate. If I cannot understand you, I will not say clear. I will ignore you, happily and without remorse. If I don't know what you're saying, i.e. I cannot hear you, then you have obviously failed to persuade me of anything. One of the things I like about debate is that it has the potential for artful and nuanced use of language, because I believe that debate is in many ways an art form. Callum is more honest than most people, so he'll just say that he's going to check out. Most judges will be like, no, I'll try really hard to pay attention, and then as soon as you're like, they'll just stop paying attention. Last one, David Height, former coach of debate at Emory, NDT champion, coach at Westminster. If you don't slow down, I hope you lose every debate. He actually said that. A caveat, this does not mean go slow. This does not necessarily mean go slow. What it means is that clarity is the primary objective, hence clarity before everything. As a normative statement, how fast you should talk is as fast as you can talk without sacrificing any clarity or persuasion. I will occasionally judge middle school debates where before the debate this young tyke debater will come up and be like, "Sir, do you prefer clarity or speed?" And it's like, first of all, why are you British? Second of all, clarity, obviously, that's not a question. It doesn't matter how fast you talk if no one understands what you're saying. Second thing, 2, don't just read cards, speak cards. Don't just read cards, speak cards. I put this second because it's one of the biggest mistakes made at all levels of debate. Too often, people have 2 different modes of speaking, tag and analytic mode and card mode. This doesn't mean the 2 shouldn't be different. It's probably good to slow down on tags so they're a little more flowable, but that doesn't mean you need to go into power death monotone on the cards themselves. Let me give an example of this. Let's read a card in power monotone mode. Afghan withdrawal is key to Democratic base of Obama, his domestic agenda, and the midterms. This card is the fire. Rupee News in 2009. Ignoring the overwhelming Democratic voter opposition, the Constitution war threatens cost Barack Obama lead to support young people and war voters, make the president who's trying to possibility of achieving the robust Democratic agenda. Well, President Biden needs extra strategy, escalation strategy. That's terrible. Notice all the sentence breaks are gone. There's no rhythm. There's no emphasis. There's just a bunch of words. Did you understand what I was saying? Nope. Nope. Why is that? Because the brain is programmed to work in particular ways, and the brain needs pauses and rhythm to parse words and understand things. There's a reason we have grammar. It's not just to make you sad as a 6th grader. It's because it's important to understand what someone is saying. Sometimes take a paragraph of written text, remove all the capitalization, remove all the periods, remove all the commas, and try to read that and see if it makes as much sense as it did before. It obviously won't. It's actually really hard, and I challenge you to try that. This is basically what you are doing verbally if you don't emphasize certain words and vary your rhythm as you're reading a card. You're removing all the punctuation, you're removing all the capitalization, you're removing everything that allows the human brain to process those as actual sentences. It becomes impossible to be persuasive. You can't have sarcasm, you can't have anger, you can't have a clever turn of phrase because all of these things are tonal. Language is tonal, language is rhythmic. If you lose those things, then you're in trouble. If you can read the content of the evidence and not just the tag with inflection and persuasive speech, the quality of your evidence improves. Evidence gets better just based off how you read it. This is because the judge will understand the evidence while you read it, and therefore will be able to process it, might not have to call for it. The judge will continue to pay attention, see above about judges checking out, and magically, your speaker points will increase. It's weird. So let's read that again as if we're actually trying to make our judges happy and not make them want to, work at Starbucks instead of being a debate coach. All right. Afghan withdrawal is key to Democratic base support of Obama, his domestic agenda in the midterms. This card is the fire. Rupee News in 2009. Ignoring the overwhelming Democratic voter opposition to the Afghanistan war threatens to cost Barack Obama the support of young people and anti-war voters who helped make him president. It could destroy any possibility of achieving his robust domestic agenda as well. President Obama needs an exit strategy instead of an escalation strategy. That's a little better. I might have been 2 seconds slower. I probably was. But you could actually understand the things that I was saying, hopefully. So, the judge is happier listening to that, and happy judge leads to me winning. See Aristotle's rule number 1 of things a good speech has above. Now, how do you do this? How do you make sure you have sentence rhythm? I hear a lot of people saying, well, if I look and, I can't read words ahead of the words that I'm reading, so I don't know what the sentence is going to look like, and blah, blah, blah. When you read a book, your eyes are always a few words ahead of the word your brain is actually processing, because that takes some time to think about. So you're almost always reading like 6 to 10 words ahead of the words you're actually saying. People tend to lose that in debate because we're reading much more quickly, and your brain can't keep up, which means you need to train yourself to look ahead and read ahead. Aside from allowing inflection and emphasis, looking ahead has some benefits. First, it can cure double breathing, because you know where the sentence breaks are, and you can know when to breathe. And it allows you to look up when you speak, which segues well into rule for better persuasion number 3. And we'll talk about how to practice looking up, how to practice reading ahead. It's just a conscious thing, practicing reading ahead. And you kind of have to get used to it and train yourself to do it. The one speaking drill you should never, ever, ever, ever do, and many of you have probably done. How many people have done the drill where you start at the bottom of a card and read all the words backwards? Don't do that drill. That drill will make you just read a bunch of words without any rhythm, because backwards sentences have no rhythm. You don't want to be a worder, you want to be a speaker. So learn to speak by reading in the correct direction. Third factor about persuasion, eye contact. Look up when you speak. Look up during cards. Look up in your 2AR and your 1AR and your 1AC. There are a lot of reasons for this. The first is that eye contact creates a reaction in people. It creates a feeling of empathy. There is science for this. Eye contact seems to have an immediate effect, according to the 1996 Psychology Today. The gaze triggers a primitive part of the human brain, calling forth one of 2 basic emotions, approach or retreat. You cannot ignore the eyes of another fixed on you. You must respond. So, eye contact forces a response. When you look at a judge, they can't not pay attention because you're looking at them. They have to respond. There's been a bunch of studies done about this. One psychology grad student was just like, I wonder what eye contact does, so I'm going to pretend to be a beggar. He went, and as a beggar, he spent a couple days asking people for change, being like, hey, can I have some change? Looking down at the ground, not making eye contact. He spent a couple of days making eye contact, radically more successful making eye contact. It doesn't just work for people, it works for baboons too. Immediately, he flattened his ears against his head, narrowed his eyelids, and began to smack his lips, the height of friendliness in baboon society. Thalia, who was a baboon, froze. Then, for a long moment, she looked him in the eyes. Only after this extended eye contact occurred did Alex approach her, at which point Thalia began to groom him, the beginning of a friendship and sexual liaison that was still going strong 6 years later. Eye contact can make baboons fall in love. It can win you debates. Other reason why you should have eye contact, it enables you to see the reactions of judges. I talked about this with judging. Judges are not poker players. They react to arguments. If you can read and see the reactions, you can adjust accordingly. Fourth factor, understand and use primacy and recency. Understand and use primacy and recency. There is proven psychological data that tells you how to sequence your arguments. This is referred to as the primacy and recency phenomenon. In a speech, in a book, in a movie, in anything else that we receive, the human brain tends to organize it and therefore will pay the most attention to the beginning and the end. in order to try to create a sort of linear narrative and make things make sense to us. You know, we remember the opening lines of books. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We remember the closing lines of books. He loved Big Brother. We don't necessarily remember all the things that happen in the middle because those are the most important parts. I'm sure you've experienced this, like a movie starts out great, then it gets kind of boring and incoherent, then things start exploding and you start paying attention again, and like everything's good by the end. And this is true with debate as well. If you put your most important arguments in like the middle of the speech, it's very likely that a judge will miss those arguments. It's very likely that a judge won't think those arguments are important because the brain sequences, you'll say the important things first. This is why we have overviews on top. Because you're trying to front load your most important arguments on top. That's why you do your impact calculus at the beginning of the speech. Because those are the most important arguments, and so you try to put them on top. Now, because debate is time pressured, you can't necessarily have a punchy ending all the time. So you don't necessarily control that because you're trying to get through everything. But in general, if you get done, don't just like sit there and mumble for a while. Finish your speech with a bang. Drop the mic, walk off. Fifth thing, name your arguments. Name your arguments. Give them a quick, succinct 2 to 3 word name. When a serial killer or some other kind of person takes someone prisoner, the by-the-book police psychology move is to repeat that person's name as often as possible, because once that person has a name, and once that person is human and has an identity, it is harder for the serial killer psychologically to kill that person because that person might matter. That person has a history, they have an identity. The boy's name is Jason Sigalos. Jason is a good child. You should leave Jason Sigalos alone because all his friends love him. Jason Sigalos is a good man. Now, you might say that. In this analogy, your arguments are poor kidnapped Jason Sigalos and the judge is a serial killer. You don't want the judge to ignore your arguments, so give them names. Give them an identity. It's very hard to remember a 1-paragraph rant that happened in the 2NC. You can't be like, hey, remember that rant I gave when I talked about this, this, and this? That's very inefficient. That's very ineffective. If you give that rant a name, it's the Funhouse mirror link to the critique. Given it a name. Now it has a reference. The judge knows what I'm talking about when I refer back to that. Every argument should have a 2 to 3 word name. Sixth thing, swagger, but not too much swagger. You need to appear confident in your arguments, but not to the point of jackassery. Courage of your convictions is important, even if you're factually incorrect. Think of that Churchill speech I was talking about earlier. A few weeks later, after the Battle of Dunkirk, when the British military was basically swimming across the English Channel because they'd lost so badly, he told the British it was their finest hour. Really kind of wasn't, but that confidence was important. There's nothing worse for your persuasion than acting baffled or intimidated, especially in cross-examination. Even if you don't know something, try to speak firmly or speak confidently. Even if you're saying you don't know something, say that with confidence, as if it's irrelevant, as if it doesn't matter, as opposed to you just being ignorant of things. You know, debates, and if you look at political debates, there's been studies that the content is irrelevant to swing voters. The thing that matters most is the perceived confidence of the speaker, how much on their game they are. Does anyone remember the first debate between Obama and Romney? When Obama seemed sort of like sleepy and out of it, and everyone was like, oh, Obama crushed in that debate. Obama said some smart things in that debate, but he was just like, It wasn't really persuasive. He wasn't really putting it out there. Same thing with the first ever televised debate, which was between Nixon and JFK. The reason Nixon lost is because he was like, TV debates are unimportant. They'll vote on the merits of things. And JFK came out there looking sharp, looking handsome, looking confident, wearing makeup, so it looked good on camera. Nixon came out there, he was like sweating and stammering, and he looked much less effective. And that perceived confidence matters. Other side to that, don't be mean, don't be excessive with it. You want to be confident in your arguments. You don't want to be egotistical as a person. You want your arguments to have ego, not you. Seventh thing, volume. You gotta be loud. Yes, even on cards. This is pretty straightforward. I won't belabor this. There is no such thing as an effective public speaker who is quiet. You don't whisper, "Let freedom ring," while standing on the steps of the Lincoln Monument. You shout it. 8, rhythm. There is music to a good speech. It flows neatly, It isn't choppy and laconic, and it also isn't boring and languid, right? It flows while varying. This means you can't double breathe or change your speed all the time. Most people would much rather listen to something soothing and rhythmic, even if it changes tempo occasionally, like the Beatles, than something discordant and chaotic like Scandinavian noise metal. There's a reason we hear the Beatles on the classic station, and we hear Scandinavian noise metal only if we desperately seek it out. Ninth thing, you are an actor on stage, and you should play a role. You are an actor on stage, and you should play a role. This is a multi-parter. First, people like characters. We like Batman because he's a crime-fighting vigilante. We like Zach Galifianakis because he's ridiculous and beardy. People like characters. You should have a character in debate. If your character is being, a nerdy, intelligent person who loves debate, that's fine. If your character is being funny, that's fine. You should try to be yourself in debate and let your personality show through, because judges and people like personality. This is part of having judges be well disposed toward you, and I think that's important. Second thing, your role changes. You have to be a different actor in different debates, because the debates have different content. This goes back to the Aristotle exciting the required kind of emotion. Sometimes you might have to be a very passionate actor. Sometimes you might have to be a very dispassionate, intelligent actor. It depends on the speech you're giving. You need to be able to change your tone within a speech. Change your tone within a speech. That means if you start your speech with one tone, and you're just bringing righteous anger, and you bring 5 straight minutes of righteous anger, that is exhausting. And it is ineffective. If someone maintains the same tone or same rhythm or same volume for the entirety of the speech, if I just gave an entire 4-hour-long speech in that Churchill mode, you would probably check out. It would lose its effect after a while. So you have to be able to change your tone and step up your tone for moments of importance. The third thing is these moments of importance. Have moments. You need to have moments. Some issues in the debate are more important than others. Some arguments are more important than others. Some understandings that a judge has are much more important than others. Which means that for those moments and for those arguments that are important, that are essential, once you've identified them strategically, identify them persuasively. If an argument is important, slow down. Make eye contact with the judge. Connect with the judge on an issue. Make a few aside statements just to make sure a judge knows that that argument is important. If you don't have a moment where you change your tone, where you vary your speaking for an important argument, you are not setting that argument off persuasively. You are saying, this argument is just as important as all the other arguments because I've said it in just the same way as all of the other arguments. The content might be more important, but the form is the same and the form is relevant. So, you need to have those moments, set those arguments aside, bracket them off as important, and if you do that, then those arguments will get a little more credence, they'll get a little more weight. 10th thing, after everything, clarity. Be clear, be clear, be clear. Speak clearly, speak with clarity. Clarity is the thing you should speak with. Clear. Section 4. Speech without speaking. Speech without speaking. We communicate in more methods than just using words. We use nonverbals. I think a few of these are particularly important. First, eye contact. I've said why this is important above. This has become more of an issue once paperless debate has happened because there is a terrible tendency for paperless debaters to end up speaking like this into their computer, and it is impossible to be persuasive when my name is Toshiba instead of having a face. Second thing, hand gestures. Hand gestures increases the impact of arguments and also helps you keep a tempo or rhythm. Some people, you notice I kind of get my walk over here, get this little thing going, get my walk over here, get this little thing going. Hand gestures help you keep a tempo or rhythm, and they help you emphasize things. Notice I said emphasizing. I have my emphasize hand emphasizing, right? It helps you emphasize things. Having like crazy hand gestures, there are some people in debate who develop these like weird rhythms. It's like I had a debate partner who just compulsively wiped his hair back. Some people just like adjust their pants constantly. That's probably not good. You should be aware of that. Some people are just like doing a wavy gravy dance. That's probably not good either. But if you're using hand gestures in order to communicate or make a point, I think that can be really effective. My favorite example of this was Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of the Soviet Union. He got up in a speech at the United Nations, and in order to communicate what they were going to do to the United States and Western Europe, he took his shoe off and he banged it on the table and he said, "We will bury you." That was a power move by Khrushchev. And you kind of knew he meant business then. If he was just like, we're going to bury you. We're going to bury you guys. We're going to take you down. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So yeah, watch out. Deterrence is the thing. Don't mess with us. Khrushchev out. That wouldn't be very effective. The fact that he banged his shoe on the table, which was totally crazy to do in such a public forum, really made the point. You knew that dude meant business. I'm not saying you should bang your shoe on the table during speeches. If you're just like, any percentage of infinity is still infinity, that's probably not. Again, the tone should match the content of the arguments, etc. Body language is important even when you're not speaking. While you're waiting for a decision, in cross-examination, if I give my cross-examination like this, I don't look very confident. If I give my cross-examination like this, I look confident. Melissa talked about this in her lecture a lot. Section 5 of the lecture, using your word canon. Using your word canon. Speaking is a physical thing. Debate is primarily a mental activity, but speaking is a physical thing. There are some parts of it that you have no control over. You don't have control over the depth of your voice. That's based off how long your vocal cords are. Unless you're having like vocal cord lengthening surgery, you don't have any control over that. And so you're just going to have to work with it. Everything else you have control over. You have control over your volume, how much you breathe. And breathing is incredibly important in debate. I think taking some lessons from like opera singers or people who sing for a living is important because they're the highest level of breathing. Notice, no opera singer will slouch their shoulders. No opera singer will sit down when they sing. They stand up straight, they bring their shoulders slightly back, they put their head to the sky, they breathe through their diaphragm, the big muscles in their stomach, so they can get the most air in their lungs. When you have more air in your lungs, then you're able to more effectively speak with longer sentences, speak with more volume, and be a more effective speaker. You don't have to breathe as much, which also means you don't get like the gaspy double breaths that are so annoying and terrible to listen to as a judge. The other thing, everything else about your speaking, your clarity, everything else is all muscles. It's muscles just like any sport involves muscles. In this instance, the muscles are your epiglottis, the back of your throat, your lips, and your tongue. Those three things combine to make every sound in the English language based off just a vibration that's happening down here. This vibration is the same. The way that vibration gets resonated is based off the shape of the inside of your mouth at the time. And so doing speaking drills and learning how to vary and change that is an important thing to do. You're doing okay. We're going to get it done. All right, section 6, powering through. Section 6 is let's get literary. Let's get literary. I was a creative writing major in college. That's why I'm employed. So I think good writing makes for good speech writing, and this was something that always informed the way I debated, and I think is maybe left out a little bit in a lot of things. There are some golden rules for creative writing. The first is omit needless words. Omit needless words. How many of you have read that Strunk and White Guide to Style book in an English class? No? Maybe? Some? If you haven't, you probably will at some point when you take a writing class. One of the most important things in there is that you should omit needless words. Word efficiency and brevity are important. It makes our speech more impactful, and given the debate is time pressured, it allows us to make more arguments. Everyone has fluff phrases. You'll hear people say, at the point where, it's my least favorite phrase in the English language. It's like, at the point where the dissent turns the case, that's the point where the case solves, and that's the point where we win the debate, because it's the point where God gave us if for a reason. Just say if. Ah. Why do you need at the point where? Next thing, send the passive voice back to the dark place it crawled from. What is the passive voice? Lousy verb constructions using the verb to be. So for example, is going to. The counterplan is going to solve the case. Why wouldn't you just say the counterplan solves the case? You can use verbs as opposed to bad passive voice constructions, or we are winning that, or even worse, we are going to win that. So wasteful, so weak. Try to get rid of those things from your speech. Everyone has these speaking tics. You should watch yourself on video. You'll find that you have some tics too. Maybe you say maybe you say a particular phrase over and over again. Have someone do some tally marks. Have someone throw pieces of paper at you every time you say it. Have someone squirt you with a water gun every time you say it, the point where. You'll eventually train yourself out of it. There are other things in the Let's Get Literary section that we probably don't have time to get to. Short version is that, things like parallel structure and repetition, like I had a dream, the I had a dream speech, things like the use of metaphors, similes using like or as, things like alliteration. We will have no parley with you and your grisly gang who work your wicked will. That was Churchill again. All of those things are effective techniques. For example, something like antithesis is another literary or rhetorical technique. As George Patton said, no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor bastard die for his country. That's an example of an antithesis statement. For example, you could be like, it's not try or die, it's try and die. It's a use of an antithesis statement to respond to some of the stuff that Stephen said and make all his beautiful logic irrelevant. Whole bunch of those. We won't get into those because we don't have time. So, the techniques I've described and the things I've been talking about are, at the outset, sort of a thankless craft. It's not like you hear a judge saying, wow, you really got it done with that sweet 2AR alliteration. And I really like the way I could understand the words in your card. In fact, you're never going to hear that. You may find some of this stuff boring and just be playing Tetris while I've nerded out for the past hour or so. But I promise you, if you do all of the things I said, and maybe even integrate some of the literary tricks at the bottom, your speaker points will drastically improve and you will win more debates. You will also get non-debate opportunities. It's a damn shame that so many debaters are terrible public speakers. If you do the things well, a world of opportunities will open up for you. I got to go to Japan and do public debates just because I was able to be a public debater for no other reason than I thought about witty turns of phrase while I was brushing my teeth in the morning. Don't shut your computers. Don't be that guy. What I've suggested that you learn is not easy. You can't simply be told these things and then have it down, like is the case for a lot of things we do at camp. We can't simply give you a list full of theory arguments and a file full of cards to teach you persuasive speaking. Persuasive speaking isn't like that. It's not simply information or data to be conveyed. It's a craft. It's a craft like learning music is a craft. Your voice is your instrument. Your sheet music is composed of words and arguments, and just like with an instrument, you can't become a master overnight. It takes thought. It takes practice. It takes effort, and worse, because the debate community and camps don't prioritize this sort of learning, even though it's incredibly important, you will have to practice and learn on your own. You'll have to watch videos to see your inefficiencies. Conscientiously try to write impactful overviews. Practice your breath, your rhythm, and your volume. Soon you'll hear yourself speaking smoothly, rhythmically, and with force. You'll hear a music in your words, a power not practiced in the rote argumentation of your opponents. It will take time, it will take care, it will take the motivation of a craftsperson's joy, but in the end, I promise you one thing: if you take pride in your words and how you say them, the debate community will take pride in you. Thank you. All right, go along.